Okay, class, so here's the deal. I'm not going to do every single problem, but I am going to go through and do several things. Some of them I'm going to do really quick, so just keep in mind you can always press pause or rewind if you need to slow down and write something down. Okay, so number one, we're simplifying. We should be prime factoring. So we have a pair of 5s, that's 5 square root 2, but there was already a 2 out in front, so we get 10 square root 2. We should pick B. Oops, we're prime factoring on 2 as well. So we'll get a 10 square root 3. 3 we did in class. Right, when we add the numbers in front. We keep the label the same. Number 5, we need to simplify so that we can make them match. Okay, so that becomes a 4 square root 7, but there was already a 7 out in front. So that's a 28 square root 7 plus a 4 square root 7. Which will give us a 32 square root 7. Okay, we have a lot of choice going on down here, so I'm going to try and choose some different options so you can see some variety. But number 6, this is set up in x squared plus bx equals c, so this is perfect for completing the square. B is -4, half of that is -2, squared is 4. So this factors in x minus 2 squared equals 9. When we square root, we need the plus or minus. So 2 options, a +3 plus 2 and a -3 plus 2. Now, if you're someone who says, Ms. McKinney, I'm just going to do the quadratic formula all the way, that's fine. You need to get this set equal to 0, right? So your A would equal 1, B would equal -4, C will equal -5. We'll do underneath the square root. Okay, so we get 36. Square root of 36 is 6. So we'll do 2 options, 4 plus 6 over 2, 4 minus 6 over 2. Make sure if you're using your calculator here that you're doing 4 plus 6 equals divided by 2. 4 minus 6 equals divided by 2, right? And we still get that 5 and -1. Okay. Number 8, maybe you decide this one is set equal to 0, so maybe you want to factor. Okay, here we need the large one to be positive, the smaller one to be negative. So this is going to be x minus 2 and x plus 8. We'll set those both equal to 0. So we'll get a -8 and a +2. Okay, having this number in front of the x squared is a pretty big sign, especially if it's 3 terms that we want to use the quadratic formula. So let's see, we'll say 19 because the negative of -19 is +19. Okay, so underneath our square root, we get -119, and as soon as we have a negative underneath the square root, this should really be a no real solution, but let's see. Okay, 10 doesn't have an x to the first power. We added the square root, so that's going to be a plus or minus 4, which means we need 4 and -4. Again, when we square root, a plus or minus 5, so we'll pick A. 12 doesn't equal 0, so we'll need to subtract that 10 to get our C value. So A will be 2, B will be -19, C will be -10, so we should pick B. No solution means that it does not touch the x-axis. So the one that doesn't touch the x-axis is C. Okay, then number 14, some options, factoring, completing the square, quadratic formula. I'm going to try and pick some different ones here. This already equals 0, so factors of 8 that add up to -6 would be a -2 and a -4. You can set those both equal to 0. We'll get x equals 2 or 4. Number 15 is a binomial, but I can't use a square root because it has an x to the first power, but I can factor out a GCF. Hmm. 16 is just like 15. Can factor out a GCF. And -7. 17 is 3 terms and has a 2 in front, so my guess is a lot of us would choose the quadratic formula. Remember, there's a 1 there, so we'll say -1. Okay, so we put that in under 9. Since that's a perfect square, we'll have -1 plus 3 over 4, -1 minus 3 over 4. Okay, so this will be 2 over 4, which is 1/2, -4 over 4, which is -1. Number 18, b is not even, so completing the square might get a little bit more difficult. You need to use a calculator. Maybe you want to subtract that 6 over. Okay, multiples of 6, that will add up to -5. We can do x minus 6 and x plus 1. So we get x equals 6, x equals -1. Okay, number 19, we don't have an x to the first power, so even though these numbers are a bit different, we can still solve by taking a square root. You just might need your calculator to help you. Okay, so in your calculator, if you need to, you can do the square root of 9/16. Okay, it's really just taking the square root of 9, which is 3, taking the square root of 16, which is 4. Remember, we added the square root, so it gets a plus or minus. You might do completing, I haven't done a completing the square yet, so maybe completing the square for 20. If we're gonna do completing the square, we need this to be set equal to the constant. So we'll add that 4 to each side. Right, we can't take the square root of 7, nor can we simplify the square root of 7. So we just get an answer that says x equals plus or minus the square root of 7 minus 2. I get a negative underneath this square root, so this is a no real solution. Most of us probably are going to do quadratic formula here. Start plugging in. Remember, there's a 1 here. So underneath the square root. $113. Okay, so we would check to see if we could simplify 113. Nothing's going to split in there, so that's just our answer. So we'll have -1 plus or minus the square root of 113 all over 4. Number 23. Let's do another one with the quadratic formula here. We'll do underneath the square root. Okay, now here we can simplify the square root of 20. right? So we'll get 2 square root 5. Now, we said if we were here, we would look at all 3 outside numbers and see if they can be reduced by anything. They can all be divided by 3. So we'll get 3 plus or minus 1 square root 5 all over 1. So our final answer would be x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 5. Here's just choosing what method you would pick. So, maybe you say I would choose the quadratic formula because I can find A, B, and C easily. I wouldn't want to complete the square because -5 is odd, right? You could sort of pick your choice of what you like to go with there. 25, okay, so our comparison phrase, whatever we read second, right? So our width, let's let that equal W. Right, our length is 2 more than 4 times the width. Okay, so that gets me there, which means my area is length times width equals 289. So I can distribute 4w squared plus 2w equals 289. Maybe quadratic formula here. Sorry guys, I'm hitting the table. Hopefully that's not wobbling too much. So underneath the square root, now we said we are ready for a label, which means we want to approximate. So we're going to take the square root of this. I mean, obviously if it was a perfect square, we would square root it, but it's not. Okay, so we want a decimal approximation, so 68.03 maybe. All right, so we have -2 plus or minus 68.03 all over 4. So 2 options here. -2 plus 68.03 over 4 and -2 minus 68.03 over 4. Okay, so we'll calculate those 2 options. $16.50. Oh, guys, this is a 4. This is an 8. I'm sorry. This is an 8. This is an 8. Try that again. $8.25. Sorry if you were watching and it stressed you out for a while. Right, we want the positive option. So this option we don't want. So we want the 8.25. So that was what we solved for, which was our W. So this is going to be 8.25 feet. Okay, our length is going to be 4 times that plus 2, right? I'm plugging it back in up here. So that's going to be 35 feet. Okay, the last one is just a basic equation. Variables are on opposite sides. Fractions are friends. So we'll just get x equals 10 over 3. You would have that as 3 1/3 as well.